This is the 1800 hours GMT edition of the Khoodeelaar television channel, being broadcast on Sunday, the 19th of March 2023. This is the Khoodeelaar television channel being broadcast under the banner of the Baby Angel Geronimo editions on Sunday, the 19th of March 2023. This particular edition, part B, I think we are going to spend most of it in examining the stupidity being peddled as the mythology about Michael Heseltine and his achievements in the Financial Times weekend, Financial Times. What is the claim? Well, let's check the image of the page, if you can get that somehow on the in front of the camera. This is a reversed kind of way of the image. It can be kind of reversed to look positive. This is Michael Heseltine's image drawn by somebody for the Financial Times. And in this piece, the Financial Times' so-called political editor, George Parker, is saying a complete and utter rubbish thing, and he's saying this as if it's true. What Parker is saying, and let me just get the side of this a bit clearer. So on this same page, it says which the development corporations set up by Heseltine to resurrect Liverpool and the London Docklands trampled on local democracy, sweeping away planning rules, cleaning toxic sites, making provisions for schools, and creating certainty for investors, which gave him greater satisfaction. Liverpool, he says, without hesitation. There are not many Tory cabinet ministers who have been offered the freedom of this city. He smiles. It was the human dimension. The East End was derelict. This fucking lying cunt. You had 6,000 acres of dereliction. Reclaiming derelict land is a challenge, but it's much, much easier than turning around, to use a phrase, derelict communities. Now, I don't like that phrase, but it's basically communities that have lost their confidence. Liverpool city centre docks are today one of the country's biggest tourism and cultural sites. Now, what the fuck is he saying he has done for the Eastern communities, you fucking lying crook? What happened in the East End of London with the participation of Dyer, Michael Heseltine, his wife, had been for centuries, especially as the Isle of Dogs, which is where the achievement Heseltine is next to where the pre 1965 up of people that were in the 1920s dedicated, whatever the motive, dedicated for the rejection then conservative rates increase at the expense of the people of Poplar. And the councillors, the so-called Poplar councillors, included, of course, George Lansbury, and Poplar councillors in 1921 rejected the conservatives of 1921. So let's check what even the wiki entry. So there is a piece, an entry dated 28th of May 2015. It's on the Oxford Dictionary of National Poplar councillors. Poplar councillors were the 30 level imprisoned in September 1921 for their protest against the inequalities. Sorry, I'll read that again. Imprisoned in September 1921 for their protest against the inequitable distribution of local taxation across the capital. Thus coined the term Poplarism, denoting the use of local government power to relieve poverty in a deprived area, defying, if necessary, parliament and central government. The solidly working class of Poplar had long generated idiosyncratic of local socialism. It displayed a fragmented industrial structure, making it difficult to address the problem of local poverty through union action. Casual labor was endemic in the principal local industry, the docks, while female labor, hard to unionize, was prevalent across the borough. The area suffered from a long term unemployment problem which would become chronic as local industries contracted in the post recession. Working class politics consequently focused less on conventional wage bargaining than on questions of poverty and social exclusion. By extension, popular socialism was less masculine than labor politics elsewhere, concerned with the family economy and the shortcomings of a local environment characterized by slum housing and inadequate open space and public facilities. Activists look to municipal institutions, the Borough Council, and the Poor Law Guardians Board to tackle social disadvantage, etc., etc. So these are the people who went to jail. There is a picture of the. So there are mentions to Edgar Isaac Lansbury, Minnie Lansbury, Julia Scarr, Samuel March, David Morgan Adams, Nellie Francis Cressel. And this is a piece, as I said, it's part of a piece I've read. It's popular counselors from Oxford National Biography. And it's published on the 28th of May, 2015. Notice the date, 2015. 2015 is the year when the Bethlehem girls went to Syria. 2015 was the year when the corrupt councillor, corrupt local mayor, Tower Hamlets Council Mayor Luther was ousted by the election commissioner Richard Morey. Now, the description, I'll come to the whole, this is the part B. This is the part that I'm devoting to a diagnosis of the promotion of Michael Heseltine, the aspect of Michael Heseltine, let's say, that claims to have regenerated Liverpool, and in the same way that in the same sentence it says he changed the East End of London. Now, he didn't change the East End of London for the people of the East End of London, that's for sure. So let's go back to this piece where he talks about the East End of London. Heseltine says, crucially, that the free market Thatcher supported his, that is Heseltine, efforts to use the government's muscle to regenerate Liverpool and the East End of London. Now that's where it is an absolute lie. I'll come to talk about Liverpool, but as far as the East End of London, it was absolute lie. I was there, and the fucker messed up the East End of London. What he did was behave as a robber. He took over the Docklands area and he gave it to the big business. That's what he did. And the Isle of Dogs was, of course, derelict, but he didn't make it any better whatsoever for the ordinary people of the Isle of Dogs from and suffering the dereliction for a very long time, all their lives, if they were there. And most of the people, most of the areas that Heseltine didn't loot and rob of the Isle of Dogs still remain the same. Still remain the same. And I'm saying this on Sunday, the 19th of March 2025. So the Financial Times, anyone viewing this from anywhere else, not from the east end of London, but anywhere else, needs to know that the Financial Times, we have labeled it the financial crimes. We, the Khoodeelaar campaign, have been calling the Financial Times the financial crimes. Why? Because the financial crimes does not tell the truth about the finance. It's the organ of capitalism in the worst possible sense, and it is disguised. There are two disguises. One is the appearance, the color of the paper that it is printed on, or the colored paper, and the fact that it is called Financial Times. It's a kind of gravity that is not justified by the contents of the paper. It is not about the of ordinary people, ordinary life, ordinary. It is an elaborate confection of an image of a financial kind of financial bulletin or journal that is supposed to be of research, impartiality, and neutrality. None of these things can be justified by the behavior of Financial Times. It is a financial of this country. The other thing is that despite the fact that Financial Times claims to be Financial Times or claims to be the Financial Times, it has not. It has not published one single theme, analytical theme in the capitalist system. What is more, the financial crimes has not helped not even recognized in every area, in every local authority area, local council area, struggling, fighting, battling against the corruption of the local council. And it has not broken the corruption and criminality done by the councils like Sheffield, like Plymouth, massacring the environment. But it made no difference. The of each of these councils went ahead and massacred the trees. So when the financial crime says that, and I'll read this again because it needs to be read again. The development corporations set up by Heseltine to resurrect Liverpool and the London Docklands trampled on local democracy, sweeping away planning rules, cleaning toxic sites, making provisions for schools, and creating certainty for investors. Now, the only thing that is true in that whole statement is the admission that he trampled on local democracy, but I'll come to that. And the other thing is that he created certainty for investors. And then it says, which gave him greater satisfaction. No, which gave him greater satisfaction? Question mark. Liverpool, he says, without hesitation. There are not many Tory cabinet ministers who have been offered the freedom of the city, he smiles. Into the human dimension. The East End was derelict. Now that is true. But then the rest is lie. You had 6,000 acres of dereliction. Reclaiming derelict land is a challenge, but it's much, much easier than turning around, to use a phrase, derelict communities. Now, I don't like that phrase, but it's basically communities that have lost their confidence. Liverpool city centre docks are today one of the country's biggest tourism and cultural sites. Heseltine's main course, that takes back to the lunch. Now, in the London Borough of Tower Hamlets, where both the Isle of Dogs and the Poplar area are situated, things have got worse. Things have got worse because the image of the that Heseltine kind of initiated and launched and created is disproportionately false and more false than it was before Heseltine intervened. Because the image of gives the impression that the London Borough of Tower Hamlets, the East End of London, has benefited from the Docklands. It hasn't. All the businesses, all the main businesses and the investments and the profiteers that are operating from and have been operating from the Docklands that Heseltine created, launched, are outsiders. Outsiders to the East End of London, the London Borough of Tower Hamlets, ordinary people. They're not from the ordinary population, not from the ordinary demography of the East End of London. There is not one single individual that can be found from amongst the ordinary population in Tower Hamlets that can be said to ever use a buzzword called the Docklands. Nobody has gone to the Docklands from the rest of the borough. Those who have done are suspicious, dubious characters. For example, the criminals operating from the areas outside of the Docklands have now sought spaces in the Docklands area, not because they find the Docklands closer to the community that they claim to be representing, but because they can escape from those communities and hide in the Docklands. That is what the Docklands has been doing. For crooks to hide and escape from the other part, ordinary parts of the Borough of Tower Hamlets and avoid being found out. That's what is happening. Now, he created the Docklands Development Corporation. Why and how? Because when Heseltine created the Docklands Development Corporation, he was able to do that. He was able to confect it because the Labour Party in Tower Hamlets, as well as the GLC, Remember that was 1980s, beginning of the 1980s. The Labour Party controlled the GLC from May 1990 and his co-crooks, and the Labour Party in control of council over the 1990s, not until 1994, because that was in control of the SDP liberal crooks. And the Isle of Dogs, ordinary demography, was very much right wing racist who elected Derek Bacon in September 1993. In the first part of 1990s was completely futile, useless, inactive. And the Labour Party, although in control at the GLC, as fronted by the crook Ken Livingstone, was completely corrupt itself. So it had really no moral backbone with which to resist the corruption, the further corruption of the area in the east end of London. Dereliction to communities exists, but it doesn't. It cannot be explained by the natural propensities of the people that are affected by the dereliction. It is the dereliction of duties owed to the people by the local town councillors, the council that had been in control for decades until 1986 when the Lib Dems took over in the form of SDP Liberal. The Labour Party has neglected the East End of London. The Labour Party at the GLC had neglected because although it was out of power until 1981, when it did come to power in 1981, in May 1981, it failed. It failed to show any engagement with the docklers. And yet, the GLC was called Greater London Council, which means that it was supposed to be the regional London organization that had the democratic legitimacy to speak up for areas like the Isle of Dogs, the Docklands. Instead, the robber, Michael Heseltine, intervened and ran away, ran off with any legitimacy that the GLC could claim about the future shape or form or status of the local council or local democracy in the Isle of Dogs, in relation to the Isle of Dogs. When George Parker in the Financial Times says that Heseltine trampled on local democracy, Parker is not mourning or regretting that trampling of local democracy. What Parker is saying, in effect, is grandstanding and actually praising, admiring Heseltine for trampling on local democracy. Now, if you looked at the behavior of the local council, the SDP Liberal Council, starting May 1986, you could see that there couldn't be bothered about what was happening in the Docklands at all. I love dogs. I took part in the takeover, a protest takeover, campaigning takeover of one sitting of the Town Hamlets Council at Patriot Square. Shortly after the SW Liberals took over the Town Hamlets Council at the May 1986 election. And we took over the council sitting because Jeremy Shaw had declared the boats policy. So we wanted to stop that. Now, we had no idea as to the actual details of how the STV liberal criminals would react to our action. But react they did. Not long after that, Jeremy Shaw and other criminals with him plotted to remove the town hall to Mulberry Place, which is where it had been until this February. And they wanted to take the town hall as far away from the center of the population as they physically could. And Mulberry Place, on the eastern side of the Blackwall Tunnel, was as far as they could take it. And Mulberry Place, from the 1980s, late 1980s, let's say, or whenever they took this there, until this month, last month, that is February, was as unapproachable physically, unreachable physically for the ordinary people as it could be. So instead of respecting local democracy, the locally elected STP liberal scum showed nothing but contempt for local democracy, local people, local say. So they were behaving as the other side of the coin from which Michael Heseltine operated, taken over by Michael Heseltine, and the rest of the demography in Tar Hamlets was taken over and betrayed by the crooks and criminals as the liberals. I also took part in the actions against for the area was a tiny man called Sadiq Ahmad. Sadiq Ahmad was an unexpected councillor. His ability to stand as a councillor, but I didn't help him by any way, expecting to betray the community. I helped him in order to encourage him to take part in the democracy and to represent the community's interests that other councillors were not representing. But to my astonishment, that midget, Sadiq Ahmad, betrayed the and he with the people, local electors, that although he was a Bangladeshi electors from the area burned his effigy, something that hasn't happened as a matter of fact in Tar Hamlets. Ordinary people have not done, let alone burn them. But Sadiq Ahmed's effigy was burnt outside the Patriot Square, then headquarters of Taram's Council. Not because Sadiq Ahmed had done anything in terms of policy against the community, because he was not in power. What Sadiq Ahmed had done was to show disrespect to an elector and lied to the elector about that. And the people are so outraged that then followed a series of protests personally aimed against Sadiq Ahmed. And it culminated in the effigy being burned outside the Patriot Square town hall. It has been said that the series of protests, action that the local community took against Sadiq Ahmed affected Sadiq Ahmed psychologically very seriously. We do not have any conclusive evidence either way about that, but we have evidence of the fact that Sadiq Ahmed never recovered from the loss that he suffered in the contacts with the community. And I never spoke to Sadiq Ahmed again. I was outraged and truly disgusted by his lying and dishonesty. And the display of against the people voted for him. Sadiq Ahmed until then was nobody. I had tutored him for a good 1 year, years before he became a councillor. And I tutored him in issues and subjects and topics that he never have been able to get tutored in. To do that, he would have to have done a university course, which he was not in a position to do. So the claim that George Parker makes in the Financial Times about derelict communities can be applied to the behavior of the likes of Sadiq Ahmed. It was not the ordinary people that were derelict, but it was the people claiming to be persons, individuals, claiming to be representing those people who are derelict, like Sadiq Ahmed. We shall be talking about all of those topics further in due course, and we shall continue to diagnose the Financial Times' lying profile in the context of the East End of London, profile of Michael Heseltine. In later editions, this edition, part B, is being ended at 1843 hours GMT with just under 40 minutes length.